One thing about this page is that it's pretty boring. Uh, this is like totally not necessarily a best practice, but I like to put sort of like quirky, weird, goofy little things on my web page, mostly just to make it more interesting for me, but also, yeah, I don't really know. I just think it's fun. So that's what I'm going to do here, and I'm going to frame it as that it's a good way of teaching about CSS animations and transitions and everything. My goal is going to be for this image, when you hover over it, to spin around, glow like the sun, and for the image in the center to grow a mustache and a goatee and chest hair and a monocle. So I have this image prepared right here. This is the way I wish I looked. And then I'm going to need to do a couple things here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give this a class of headshot. And I'm doing this because I want to be able to differentiate this image from other images. So now I can say any image that's inside a div with a class of headshot, and I can just style that. I don't just have to do image all by itself and make every single image on my page grow chest hair. I only have one image right now, but I'm probably going to have more, and I don't want them all to grow mustaches and chest hair and stuff. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, let's work on getting this to spin around. So I'm going to say headshot. So I'll define this thing. And then also headshot hover. This is called a pseudo selector, and it selects an element or only applies rules to an element under this specific condition. So when it's being hovered over. Just to give you a demonstration of that, if I do something like border 10 pixels solid red, now whenever I hover over this, it gets a border of 10 pixels of solid red. That's not what I'm going to be doing though. I want this to spin around, so I'm going to say that when it's hovered over, it should rotate 360 degrees. Now, you're probably thinking, but Robin, rotating 360 degrees is not really rotating at all. It's exactly right back where it was. But what you can do is you can use a CSS transition to make it spin around. So let me put that in here, and then I'll explain what it's doing. Transition, transform, I'll say 1 second. All right, so now, yeah, check that out. That's pretty cool. And I can see that this is sort of spinning around and getting all weird. I'll fix that in a minute. But yeah, there you go. It's pretty good progress. Okay, so the way transition works is it looks for a particular property that you've defined in a pseudo selector. So in this case, in hover, it's looking for this transform property right here. And it's saying that whenever the state of this element changes, so whenever you hover over it, then it's going to transition this rotation instead of just jumping directly to it. What transition means is it's going to take these 360 degrees right here, which you can increment through. So you can go 1, 2, 3, blah, 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 all the way up to 360. And it's going to apply this a little bit at a time. It's going to work up to 360 just a few degrees at a time. And so that's what it does right here. Without this, it's just going to apply those full 360 degrees all at once. And that's not what I want. I want it to spin around just like this. I'm going to add another transition. Well, actually, before I do that, I'm going to try to make it so that this weird scrolling stuff that you can see doesn't happen when I hover over it. So to do that, I'm going to give this headshot div a width of 300 pixels and a height of 300 pixels, which is the exact same width as this image right here. Now, that pretty clearly did not do what I wanted to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say margin 0 auto. Actually, I'll do it this way. I'll do margin left auto, margin right auto. Now, text you can align in the middle of your page with text align center, but it's called text align center for a reason. If you have something like an image like this, which is not text, or a div, which is what this thing with the class of headshot actually is, to center that, you need to change its margins. Margin left auto and margin right auto. This is very standard, something you're going to see all the time. It's kind of weird that they named it this way. I'm not really sure why they did. Looking at it, it's not very intuitive at all. But basically, it's just saying that the website, the browser, should sort of automatically figure out what the margins should be, and by default, it's going to try to align it to the center. Let's see. Let me give this guy an outline. Okay, so that's kind of weird. I don't actually want this to be hanging out outside the edge of that page. So what I'm going to say is that this hero image, it should be 100% the width of the element that it's inside and 100% the height of the element that it's inside. There we go. That's much better. Okay, cool. So now I can get rid of that outline. And then let's see. Yeah, that's looking really nice. Okay, so this, forgot to mention, this 1s right here, this is how long you want the transition to take. So if I do 10s, then it's very slowly going to rotate. But if it's just 1s, then it's going to take 1 second for that to take place. All right, next up, I'm also going to mention that I wanted to have it glow like the sun, so that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to say that when you hover over it, it's going to have a box shadow. Before we saw text shadow. Box shadow is shadowing for stuff that is not text. And then I'll say 0 per x, 0 px. Yeah. All right, so that is not quite what I want. I don't want it to be all, I don't want this white square to be there, so I'll change that in a minute. But box shadow, so these first two things are saying how far off of the image you want the shadow to be offset. So if I do 50 pixels, you can see that the shadow is sort of slanted away from the image, and it's slanted 50 pixels. I want it to just be directly behind the image though, which is why I'm leaving it at 0. 100, this is how much blur you want that shadow to have. And 50, this is how much, well, it's not really even blur. It just sort of draws an outline or a border the around the image. It's like a solid shadow. So I wanted to have 50 pixels of solid shadow followed by 100 pixels of blurring. And there we go. To make that white square go away, I'm going to give this guy a border radius of 50%. There we go. And because I have that border radius there, I no longer need this border radius in this image right here. I mean, it can, it's not really going to hurt anything, but I may as well just have it in one place. That seems to have caused problems, but I can fix it by saying Overflow Hidden. So by default, it's going to try to make stuff that goes beyond the boundaries of this border radius. It's going to try to make those show up. But with this overflow hidden, you could say, hey, anything that overflows beyond the border, it should be hidden instead of staying visible. And so now I get this sweet sunlight effect right here. I'm going to have that sort of gradually fade in by adding box shadow on here. So I'm going to say box shadow, and I want that to transition also over 1 second. So now when I hover over this, that glow sort of fades in, which is a lovely effect. You can actually have multiple box shadows all inside the same property. What I'm going to do this time is I'm going to say I want 100 pixels, 20 pixels, 960, that's sort of an orangish color, inset. So inset means a set of the shadow going out from that particular element. It goes into the element. That totally did not work, so I must have forgotten something. Let's see. What did I forget? Oh, you know what? I know what it is. This is something for down the road. The last step in here is I want that mustache picture of me to show up. So I'm going to give this headshot a background image, and I'm going to use that Robin mustache thing as a background image. And you can't see it right now because it's a background and it's got this image hanging out in front of it. But what I can do is I can say that whenever you hover over the headshot, any images inside it, so any image that is inside a headshot being hovered over, that should have an opacity of 0. And now, bam. So there's that sort of brownish fading in effect that I had before, and my sweet mustached face. One thing I do want to do is I'm going to add background size contain, and that's going to contain this background image to the size of the container that it's inside. By default, this image is, I don't know, I think probably 400 or 500 pixels wide, and so you can tell because it's not aligned the same way this one is. If I do background size contain, now it's going to be contained, all of it contained inside this element right here. All right, so the actual last step is going to be to get that headshot, that mustache image to fade in gradually. So I'm going to do the same thing with transitions. I'm going to say that the opacity should transition over 1 second. And there we go. Yeah. So now you can see that my mustache fades in and fades out, and this sun effect and everything goes on. So lots of things covered in this step. The reason I'm doing them all in one step is because they're not like super essential things. They're all just sort of fun, nice to haves that you could put in your toolbox for down the road. All right, so I'm going to add and commit. I don't know what to say for this. I'll say added sweet, twirly, glowing hero image. And I'll push that up. And I'll push it to GH Pages as well, so it's actually online. And then my website is up and available for all to see in all of its rotating glory.